Hi, everybody. It's Jay, and I am back in the booth again for another live sneak peek preview video reading for this week's new audiobook release here on Say with Jay. Our new audiobook release this week is Cowboy Dancing All Night, and we're going back to Sweetwater once again. Now, you may ask yourself, why am I dressed like a human highlighter? Does he have no fashion sense? Well, that's entirely possible, but no. We're going back to Sweetwater for Easter. Now, I know we're just settling into fall here, but it's the spring in Sweetwater, and the Peacemakers Quilting Club and amateur matchmakers have found maybe their most difficult challenge yet. They're trying to match Peyton Sinclair, single mom and owner of the used bookstore / bakeshop, with Bryce Shaker. Now, Bryce has recently come to Sweetwater in the last year or so, and he lives in his family's ancestral mansion outside of Sweetwater. He's a bit of a recluse because he's a former Major League Baseball player who had a horrible accident that left him scarred and disfigured, and while he was recovering from that, a hacker broke into his social media accounts and posted some racial slurs that wound up getting him canceled. Those two events, both physical and a mental injury, were too much, and he's come back to live in his family's home to basically be a hermit. Now, the Shaker Mansion is not just one of the largest homes in North Dakota. It also is the home to very possibly the largest private library collection in the Midwest. And that is where the Peacemakers get their in. Bryce has let Miss Charlene know that he's interested in having somebody catalog the library collection, which was owned by his great-grandmother, his grandmother, and his mother. Well, who better to do that than the local bookstore owner? There's just one little problem, though. Obviously, as I've said, Bryce is not a very nice person. He's a very, very angry man at what has happened to him. So, can he and Peyton overcome this to not just be not enemies, but maybe be friends and even more? Of course, you know you've got to come back this Friday for the full release, which, by the way, is going to be a simultaneous release in audiobook and ebook form in the Kindle store. But we will have a little sample for you here in just a bit on Say with Jay. But before we do, as I said, I am dressed in bright green because it's nearly Easter in Sweetwater. And as you might know if you followed this series, Jessie has been including dishes in these books, in this series, and I've been cooking them for you. This week is no exception, and we're going to make a fairly obscure Southern holiday dish. Now, we learn in the book, and this is no spoiler to tell you this, that both Peyton and Bryce spent their formative years in South Carolina. And they have a discussion about this fairly uniquely Southern dish, and like I said, it's fairly obscure. Not even all Southerners are familiar with it. But it's something that usually makes an appearance around the holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and especially Easter. And it's a staple for lots and lots of church potluck dinners, too. I'm talking about Pineapple Casserole. It's an interesting mix, hear me out, of sweet and savory, and I can tell you from personal experience, at church potlucks anyway, it's something that I might not get in my first pass through the line, but when I come back for a little more, that usually definitely gets added as maybe a little pre-dessert dessert. Here is how we make pineapple casserole. It's super quick, super simple, and as always, don't worry about the ingredients, capturing all the ingredients if you're interested. I'm going to include them in the description below. You might have to hit see more to see the ingredient list, but it'll be there so you don't have to worry about jotting it down now. Okay, to make pineapple casserole, you're going to need 2 20-ounce cans of pineapple chunks in juice, not syrup. You're going to want to drain those very well, but reserve at least 3 to 4 tablespoons of the pineapple juice. You need 1 1/3 cups of sugar, 1/3 of a cup of all-purpose flour, 1 cup of shredded cheddar cheese, 1/4 cup of butter, melted, and 1 sleeve of Ritz crackers, crushed. Our first step is to preheat our oven to 350 degrees. Then, in a medium bowl, we're going to combine our sugar, our flour, our reserved pineapple juice. You're going to give that a good stir, mix that up. And then add your pineapple chunks and mix well. Once this is combined nicely, you're going to spoon that into the casserole dish and spread it out. After this, you're going to top it with the cheddar cheese. It adds such a nice savory element to the sweet underneath. Next, we're going to combine our crushed Ritz crackers with some butter. This is a message for any fellow males who may be listening and may be about to try this. I get it. I love crushing things with a mallet as much as anybody, but if you're not careful, you could wind up with the worst exploding party favor ever. So, a better way is to pinch open the top of your sleeve of Ritz crackers so air can escape. Then feel free to choke, compress, squeeze, and otherwise treat that sleeve of Ritz crackers like it stole money from you. Then, once that's nicely crushed, open up the top all the way, pour it out in a bowl, and you've got crushed Ritz crackers with no mess at all. Okay, then you want to add your melted butter on top of the Ritz crackers. Toss that around with a fork just to get the butter spread around. Then add that on top of the casserole. From there, you just bake at 350 degrees for 30 minutes or until brown and bubbly. Once it is brown and bubbly, pull that rascal out, let it sit for a few minutes to cool, then dig in. Okay, so that is how you make pineapple casserole. I hope it interests you and you might give it a try. If you do, let us know how it turns out in the comments. Also, if you've got a fairly obscure regional dish that you like to make for the holidays, we'd love to hear about that too. Okay, now let's get on to our live preview reading of Cowboy Dancing All Night. Don't forget, this Friday, the ebook releases in the Amazon Kindle store, and you can get the full audiobook release here on Say with Jay. Daisy, lying at his feet, lifted her head and growled low in her throat. It was just a ruse because Daisy was gentle and loving. "It's probably just the wind," he said, leaning down and patting the top of her head. "You'd think she would have gotten used to it by now. You've been here almost a year, and it hasn't quit blowing the entire time," Dwight said, not angrily, but maybe a little annoyed. The wind could get to a person out here. "I think it might be someone coming," Bryce said with his eyes on Duke. He had his head up as well, a small growl coming out of his throat. Bryce looked at the window, out at the darkness that was descending. It was an odd time for anyone to visit. and an odd time for anyone to get lost. Usually, curiosity seekers came out during the day. For some reason, his mind went again to the woman who had been there that morning. He truly had wanted someone to catalog his books, but he didn't want someone beautiful, someone with fire in her eyes and long flowing hair, someone who was slender and kind, who had enough spirit to put him in his place. Yeah, he definitely didn't want someone like that. He wanted a grandmotherly old woman or a wizened old man, or maybe some teenager who might get the books confused but wouldn't tempt him with the maturity in her face and the knowledge that the world wasn't fair, knowledge that matched his. But Dwight was right, because in the fading dusk, he could see headlights. "Maybe they'll leave," he said dispassionately. It couldn't be anyone who actually wanted to see him. Still, he had barely uttered the words when his eyes went to the window again. The hair on the back of his neck pricked, and he studied the car intently. Was it blue? He was pretty sure it was, and it was old and small, and it stopped, and a woman got out wearing a heavy coat, jeans, and boots with honey blonde hair falling around her shoulders. "Wow, she's a looker," Dwight said. "You didn't tell me you had a girlfriend?" He looked at his friend, his brows raised. Don't." Maybe his words were a little surly, but the excitement that fumbled in his chest irritated him. He wanted to be nothing but annoyed, not, "Why would she be back out here?" He stood, walking with his gait that was never quite steady to the doorway, saying as he went, "This shouldn't take long. I'll be right back." "Oh, don't worry, I'm coming too." "Stay." He couldn't say exactly why he didn't want his friend hanging over his shoulder. Maybe his perfect face, unmarred by any accidents. Maybe the fact that if a woman knew anything at all about baseball, she'd recognize him. And if she'd ever seen commercials on TV, she might recognize him too. He was the face of friendly fireplaces. Yeah, jealousy. That's why he didn't want Dwight to come out with him. Dwight wouldn't be offended. He'd actually probably understand, which was almost as annoying as if he really would be offended. He didn't want anyone to have to be extra nice in order to be able to get along with him. But the fact of the matter was, that was almost the point he was at. He walked through the foyer and opened the door just as she had her hand raised to knock. "You again," he said, and was annoyed even more when he had to work to keep his eyes from running all over her. "That's funny. I was about to say the same thing." He considered her words. Had she just made a joke? He stepped out on the porch, closing the door behind him. Politeness dictated he ask her in, especially since it was getting dark and cold. It might be March, but it was March in North Dakota, which meant a lot of wind, a lot of cold, and a lot of wildness. He found he really loved it here. Even if the woman in front of him was annoying him. That's what this feeling of warmth and excitement meant, annoyance. If he kept telling himself that, he might start believing it. The woman bit her lip and looked at him from under her lashes. I was talking to my son some after he got home from school today. And it's kind of embarrassing to be shown up by a 12-year-old, but he pointed out that I hadn't acted in the best way, not the way I tell him to act and not the way I claim to believe. I didn't need him to tell me that, because I already knew it, but once he pointed it out, he knew exactly what I needed to do. He didn't interrupt her, in fact, was a little mesmerized by the movement of her lips. He jerked his eyes away. Maybe he'd been alone too long if a woman came to his doorstep and all he could manage to do was stare at her lips. Maybe he would go to that auction tomorrow night. Of course he wouldn't. He wasn't going out the way he looked. Not ever again. In today's modern world, he did not need to leave his house for anything, not even to pick up groceries, even in North Dakota. And I just wanted to say I was sorry. I got angry, and I shouldn't have. It wasn't right of me, and I wasn't kind. I was hoping that you would still give me a chance to do the job. I love books. Yeah, he might give her a chance to do the job. Not ever. You could start tomorrow. Where had those words come from? Actually, I can't start tomorrow. Then forget it. She crossed her arms over her chest. It wasn't hard to tell that his comment had made her angry. Seriously, I have a business. I can't just drop everything and be at your little beck and call. If I drop my business and lose it, when this job is over, I'll have no way of making a livelihood for myself and my child. I can't let that happen. I need to be a little bit more responsible, and I would think that you would understand that. It's not like you're offering me a full-time job. Come tomorrow or don't come at all. I will be here Friday night, and I will work until midnight. With that, she lifted her head up, as though daring to challenge him, but she spun on her heel too fast for him to be able to do anything more than open his mouth. If you need to talk to me, you may text Miss Charlene, and if you're brave enough, you can go ahead and let her know that you don't want me. Otherwise, I'll see you Friday night. She stomped off the porch, stomped back down the walk, and yanked her car door open, shoving herself inside and starting the engine before her door was even closed. If she put her seatbelt on, it was while she was driving out of his drive. He smiled. Then he laughed. How long had it been since he'd actually laughed out loud? He had to say, he was looking forward to Friday. Hi, this is Jay, and thanks for listening. If you're ready for another great audiobook, here's one we think you might like. Or check out the playlist with all our latest releases. Don't forget to subscribe to Say with Jay, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you liked in the comments.